Well, most of yours are, not all of ours are.
Okay.
Okay, hang on, let me pull up the documents I need. Well, most of yours.
Okay, we are live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the October 13th, 2020 monthly meeting of the Paul Sawyer Public Library Board of Trustees. It's 5:35 p.m. My name is Natalie Wilkerson. I'm the president of the board. I will call the meeting to order, ask our secretary, Carolyn Lynch, to record the attendance. And everyone received a copy of the agenda prior to the meeting today, and so I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. We have two meeting minutes to look at since our September monthly meeting. We had a special meeting as well. I'll give you guys a minute or so to take a look at the minutes if you haven't already. So let's start with the September 17th regular meeting. Does anybody have any edits or corrections that they see?
No.
The September 8th regular meeting?
Yes, wrong. Sorry, I got the wrong document in front of me. Okay, hang on. September 8th, 2020, regular monthly meeting. Anybody see any corrections that we need to address on that? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you all. Any last minute comments or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now let's go to September 17th, 2020. This was the special meeting that we had to address bids that we got back in for the replacement of compressor number 2 on the existing York air-cooled chiller. I'm reading that directly from the minutes. If you all have had a chance to look at those and think they look okay, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
That's good, Bob, since you're the one who made the critical motion during that meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, great. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good. Okay. Thank you to our guests for sitting through this little regular business that we've got to take care of. We're going to go to the treasurer's report now.
Okay. The revised report was sent out this afternoon by Jean. So with that, it's in the usual format, and starting at the top on the page, this is the report for our guests. Checkbook balance at the beginning of September in our operating account was $123,749.34. We had deposits in September of $208,033.34. That includes a transfer from the savings account, which I'm going to discuss in a second. And checks written for September, almost 173,000. So the operating statement at the end of September had 158,784.82. Below that is the activity of the savings account. We had 663,250.17 at the beginning of September, but had to draw that down $175,000. So the balance in that account at the end of September, 488,272.99. Our other accounts are below that, totaling 32,865.03. The line of credit is reflected below that, which is open and ready to draw on, but there's no balance on that. So our total funds as the end of September, 679,922.84. So we still have a little bit more to draw on there before our taxes start to come in. Below that is the activity after September 30 is indicated with some delinquent tax and motor vehicle tax income. Miscellaneous income total 13,418.85. And below that is our estimate of funds that are going to be needed for the next draw, and it shows the present operating bank balance, 105,000 and change. Total funds deposited, the 13,000 that I mentioned before. And then you've got deductions, electronic fund transfers, a little over $60,000. Checks remaining to pay, 78,000. Then we have estimated expenses for the rest of the month, payroll, retirement payments, health and life insurance, so on and so forth. So it's proposed that another $175,000 be drawn from the savings account, and that would leave us at the end of the month, based on current estimates, $59,237.89. Attached to that's the revenue and expenditure report, and the monthly credit card summary, which items that are charged to the credit card, and then a list of all the checks which are to be signed for the disbursements that are due to date, and that totals a little over $78,000. So that is the treasurer's report for the month.
Thank you, Bob. Who has questions about this? Besides me, because I have a couple. Okay, so my questions are, we had originally thought, if my memory serves me correctly, that we were going to have to start drawing from the line of credit in November, but it looks to me like the numbers might work out.
Yes,
You're thinking that?
depending on when the tax revenue comes in, and last year it was early in December, we may not have to draw on the line of credit at all. So
That would be so amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Bob, do you remember that line of credit? It's just open. We don't have a deadline. We can leave it as open as long as we like. Is that correct?
Well, yes, it was recently renewed, and I believe it goes through, we're doing it on an annual basis now, I believe, Gene.
Right.
And it is through June 30. We would have to renew it again next year if we decide we needed it. But it's open to draw on. It is a line of credit, and so we can carry the zero balance.
Great. Okay, so in my other question, just looking at the budget and the expenditures, the boiler expenses, the chiller expenses that just don't seem to die. Is that coming out of, what line item is that coming out of? Facility management or building repairs?
that will come out of facility management and building repairs. Between those two lines, we should be able to cover the cost of these things without having to amend the budget.
Okay,
If
okay, all
else
right.
happen, we may have to move funds between lines, but yeah, for now, we should be fine.
Okay. Great. Yes, for those of you watching at home, replacing a big part of our mechanical system was not in the in the annual budget this year, but we planned ahead for emergencies. Okay, how about, let's see, anybody have another question, or can I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
I'll make a motion to approve the treasurer's report as reported.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other concerns? Okay, let's vote then. All in favor of approving the treasurer's report as reported, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. Jean, thank you, and Valerie both. So now we have some guests here. Who's going to lead the TIF presentation?
Who is, I haven't seen who's here. Is Eric Cockley here?
Yeah,
Tell me-
Eric
And
is
the
here.
mayor.
There.
Yeah,
We have
at the
someone on
moment,
audio, a 502-247, no, 502-475-8201 that I can't identify who that is. So that Tommy or May or May.
I can check. Otherwise, Judge, if you want to give us a little intro, and then I'll go into talking about, some of the process and how we got here and where we're going, and then we'll just take questions. That's kind of what we've typically done.
Okay, that's fine with me. All right. First of all, thank you all for having us. I want you to know that it is very difficult for someone like me that does these kind of meetings. When you say all in favor, say aye, or who will make a motion. And I hold my hand up. I wanted to hold my hand up, so but it's the new norm is a whole lot different than the normal norm. So anyway, we're all living in a different world, but we're going to make it. It's all going to be okay. And part of this, the different world that is about to become normal for us is we've gone through a process of eliminating several things in the downtown area. One big building structure, and that was the old Civic Center, and that's gone. Parcel B is open, and we have a developer that has bought the property and is ready to build on it. And as that transpires, they need some money for the infrastructure of this facility, or the process that they're going to go through to build the condominiums, the office space, the retail space, the restaurants that are going to fill this parcel B. There's a program called TIF, or Tax Incremental Financing, that is available, and the city and the county will be meeting on that and setting a rate for themselves. And there are 4 entities along that are part of the taxing structure that would be part of this. Those 4 entities are the city and the county, the county extension office, the soil conservation district, the health department, and the library. So the 4 major ones that would have a significant financial gain for the developer to help move this project forward are the city, the county, the library, and the health department. The other 2 aren't that significant. But what we come to you tonight to do is to talk with you about what is going to happen and how we need your help in making it happen. So as part of the TIF program, What we're going to ask, not tonight, we're not going to ask you tonight, but we will, and it's, I understand it's incumbent upon me, for whatever reason, it's incumbent upon me to come back to you as a board and present you with the option of joining the TIF program. As a matter of fact, I would say more begging you to join the tax increment program. But this is, I'm going to do my best to explain it. It is a very difficult process. In general, it's easy, but there are a lot of particulars that make it a little more difficult than myself can explain it. And when I do come back, I will bring a TIF lawyer to come in and explain, so Bob Kellerman can make sure that everybody understands. Right, Bob? And we appreciate you, because I bet you know a whole lot about TIF. But anyway, so here's how it basically works. The city and the county will be meeting in the near future, and we will decide on being part of the TIF process. When we decide that, we're going to say that we want to give X amount of the new tax money towards the project. So I'm going to put it in real simple terms. Let's say it's $100. Let's say that the new property is going to bring in $100. It is not. It's going to bring in a whole lot more. As a matter of fact, the estimate on the building of the property is going to be 85 million, is what the developer is saying. 85 million. So you all, us, we're not, and the city, we are not getting any of that money right now. That property was bought for $1,000, and it hasn't been assessed yet for the full value of it. So let's say that if we decided to join this process, out of that $100, the city and county say we will give 75% of that money. So we'll give $75. Each of us will give $75 towards the new monies that are going to come in, and we will keep 25% of it. So that's really 25% of monies we never had. So what we're doing is we're giving monies to develop a project. In turn, we're still going to be getting more money than we ever got from that area. And so it's a win-win. And that's the simple way of trying to explain how the TIF goes. Now, as I told you before, I'm not an expert. I'm not one that goes around and speaks about TIFs. Now, as part of that, this TIF is going to be part of another TIF that won't affect you all, but that will be from the state. And so we're going to be applying for the state to get some more monies. So altogether, there's somewhere in the range between 10 and $15 million that we hope to be able to put towards this $85 million project that the developers are proposing to build in this area. Now, according to what I understand, the developers want to get started in the spring. They're ready to go put the shovels in the ground this spring, which means that all of these type of things are going to need to be in place for next year. And so that's when I come back and talk with you all about what would you be willing to do. Now, there are different times. It's like a mortgage. You can do this TIF for any number of years. It could be, you could do this for 10 years. You could do it for 15 years. You could do it for 20 years. You could do it for 5 years, but you can do this TIF in over so many years, whatever you all decide to do. But that monies then will go, if you say, I want to give 100% of our monies for 20 years, all of those monies will go to the developer to put back into the infrastructure of building this development. The one thing that I know that will be asked, and so I'll answer it for you right now. The big winner well, first of all, the big winner is us as a community, because this project is going to be so huge for downtown Frankfurt. I mean, it's amazing what the potential is for this. But also the second big winner is the Frankfurt Independent Schools. They will get 100% of the revenue for the schools that they're supposed to get. So there will not be everything that goes in, the Frankfurt Independent Schools will get that full revenue. So that's another reason we want to build this and make sure this happens. So the school system, the independent school system, which is it's amazing. I believe I heard it's close to 90% of its property is not taxable because it's under government within the city limits. So this would be huge, and I mean huge, for the Frankfurt Independent System to put this kind of money in for them. So I think I have probably confused you enough, but I'll drop back and let Eric continue forward. And I know the questions are going to come, and we'll do our best to answer them. But Eric will tell you about the process, and he'll also kind of give you a clue on what's going to be built down there too. Okay, Eric, would you ready to take over?
Thanks, Judge. Yeah. So I'll just kind of start, since the judge has given you kind of a baseline of the broad framework for how TIF operates and where the money's generated and that sort of thing. I'll just start, and I may try to share my screen if I can. To talk about the process and so where we are. So as you all have probably read in the paper, in the last month or two, the City Commission agreed on a development area, which included both parcels B and C, the Broadway corridor, and then it surrounded a few properties at the other opposite end of Broadway. So within that, we have multiple potential TIF projects, if you will. So the development area is one thing. Because you include a property in the development area does not necessarily mean that you are that they are entitled to revenue from the TIF area, or that you have you being the city, the county, the other taxing districts will necessarily enter into an agreement to provide revenue. And you can have multiple projects within a TIF that may participate at varying times, and that all comes from the development and participation agreements that you would go into. So that area has been established and then included in the TIF development plan that you all may recall several weeks ago. The City Commission had a public hearing, which is part of that statutorily required process. That development plan, unlike what most of us that work in the development world are used to when we think of the term development plan, which is a set of construction documents that describe how a project's going to be constructed. That development plan is actually a Word document that includes that development area map, but generally speaking will describe the area, the proposed projects, the potential public infrastructure that the public entities may choose to participate in, and generally describe the projects within that area. So we've completed that part of the process, and now, in addition to coming to meet with groups like you all to try to get some outreach and education, as well as obviously, since you're one of those taxing districts, we certainly want to have these conversations with you, as the judge mentioned. We're to the point in the process where the development agreement and participation agreements are going to be the next things we're working on over the next 2-3 months. Those agreements, in short, are kind of where the rubber hits the road, where we finally sit down. A lot of the questions we've gotten from different groups are about how do we know about the numbers for this, the numbers for that, how much are we going to give to this or that, and how are we going to frame that, and how do we hold accountable ourselves or the developer for what we both agreed to be responsible for. The development agreement and the participation agreement are where all of those things are put into writing, where the taxing districts would agree to whatever responsibilities they have and where the developer would agree to their respective responsibilities. Once those agreements, assuming various taxing entities come to an agreement with the developer, they will then be memorialized in ordinances that the city and county would pass.
Yeah, what the most well-done part of it, yeah.
That has happened,
Just one
and
night.
we hope that this all happens so that, as the judge mentioned, by mid to late spring would be the perfect target date to then be able to put all of these application materials together to submit to the state in hopes of getting their participation and their funding. So as I mentioned, we're between that public hearing and the development participation agreement level. And we're hoping by the end of the year, we can at least be pretty close to working through that framework. So as part of that, we're waiting now on, which we hope to get just in the next couple of days from TIF Council, a beginning framework for what that development agreement would look like potentially, that we can really start digging in, and at the same time, some additional information from the developer of the main project, which is the parcel B and C, with some additional financial information that'll help demonstrate that there is in fact, a hole in the financing that is required to be filled with some kind of public participation, so that folks, like the judge and the mayor can justify to the taxpayers why it's necessary for us to participate. And in this project, I think a lot of us that have probably been following things are familiar with the main items that have been discussed. The biggest one being the parking garage that's required of the developer to build, which is obviously a garage that generates no particular revenue for the developer. So it's quite a big chunk of change to spend $6 to $8 million on a parking garage, which you can't generate revenue from, as well as some other public improvements that were talked about in our downtown master plan, extending Washington Street back down to Clinton and Miro to extend that street grid and improve connectivity with downtown and those things. So that's kind of where we are in the process and where we're going. Just to add, I know these are some of the things that I like to remind people every time. The judge hit most of the framework of the TIF really well. I will remind folks, this, as most of you are probably aware from following the whole process with the MOA with the state and transferring of the property and our downtown master plan, it was a very unique process that, at least as long as I've been old enough to pay attention, I'm not familiar with anything like it happening before. But I like to remind people that regardless of the TIF process and regardless of whatever development agreements the city, the county, the other taxing districts may agree to, that is a separate and parallel process to our planning and zoning reviews, to any public review of zone change, which the developer will have to go through, and does not in any way get the developer out of those typical development review procedures. So at some point they will have to come to us, and obviously the zone change is a public hearing and a process that allows for that public input and knowledge about what's going on, and then ultimately we'll review development plans, subdivision plats, things of that nature. So I just always like to make that clear. That's my main spiel on process and that stuff. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, and the judge and I can kind of tag team and kind of help fill in the gaps of where we've missed, or you all have any questions.
Eric, could you review again what the footprint is? It's parcel B and C, and I know it's the warehouse, but is that all contiguous? I mean, it's not just B, C, and warehouse. Is it all the land that gets up to the warehouse? Is that all in the footprint?
Right. So with the way TIFs, especially at the state level, are looked at and approved, you do have to have some kind of meaningful connected shape. Otherwise, you would need to do entirely separate TIFs and entirely separate development areas. So the shape that we've used, which I know some people have also probably wondered, it seems a little, odd shaped, that we have parcels B and C on one end of Broadway. And then we literally follow the right of way of Broadway down Broadway, and then include the Broadway building, the warehouse building, and that empty lot currently owned by the city to the east of it. So that is the development area. So it includes those potential projects on the East Broadway side, as well as obviously what I think is safe to say that we've made it pretty clear our priority project, which would be the parcel B and C redevelopment. The reason that shape makes sense beyond the fact that it connects several different projects, which if the revenue was there, we would potentially want to consider participating, is that it does two other things. Based upon the advice of our TIF council and what we're aware of is the state's going to look at, in order to participate in the particular program, which would be most beneficial for state participation, there are several definitions of blight that they want you to be able to check the box on. And by including the Broadway project, because that building, unlike parcel B, is not demolished and still exists, and it's an older building that's been underutilized and is in various stages of condition, apparently is very helpful to our application. So we hope that'll increase the chances that the state will be able to participate. It also then includes, because, you know, as I remind everyone, this whole thing, in addition to the MOA, started with the city and the county adopting the master plan that we had all the public participation in. And that master plan also included a lot of public streetscape improvements along that Broadway corridor. So once again, that's another set of improvements that was described within our TIF development plan, that depending on how things play out, how much revenue is generated, that potentially that revenue could be used for some of those improvements as well. So, and that's the whole development area. And then just to reiterate, within that development area, there can be multiple potential project areas, which would each have to negotiate with the taxing districts independently to agree to any development or participation agreement that the city or the county might participate with. And obviously, as I mentioned, our priority right now is to work on parcel B and C in whatever appropriate way we may participate with that.
Mary Lynn, I'll piggyback on something that you said to Eric and explain to the best that I can, Eric, and you intervene if I go too far or don't go far enough. But everybody knows what parcel B is, and that's the area behind the hotel where the Civic Center was. Parcel C is where the YMCA is now and the parking garage. As part of the development, the developer has made it pretty clear that the first area that he will develop will be parcel B, but he will use parcel C as a staging area, which means that a lot of the equipment will be put there. So it is, I know the city has been working very hard, and the county has also had meetings. It is our hope that when the old YMCA goes down, a new YMCA could come up, and as part of that, it would be part of that. I mean, there's been quite a bit of talk about where the parking garage would go, and that the YMCA could be part of that as well. I know the YMCA is working on very hard at trying to raise the money to get that done. We would hope that would be the case, but just to let you know, as the city, as we're working towards opening up Washington Street, that parking garage is going to have to come down. That area is going to have to be flattened, and then it will be used as a staging area. So the old, which is the new in some people's mind, YMCA, the one built in 1970, that building will be coming down. Eric, am I correct with that?
I think you're probably right. Based on my experience, that's probably going to be the order of things that I would imagine the developer would be likely to do, particularly because obviously, as I mentioned, the parking garage, the developer has a deed restriction associated with the transfer of that property that puts a 24-month time limit on when they have to complete that garage. Otherwise, the property reverts to the Commonwealth. So obviously, that's an early priority for the developer to get that project underway and completed so that they can continue development of the property. So one of the natural ways to do that, obviously you need for this kind of project, significant staging area. Yeah, I don't disagree with the judge's assessment.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I have another one, and I didn't understand. The state will do a TIF, and the city county will have a TIF, two separate TIFs? Or is the state just going to participate in the TIF we're talking about?
Yeah, it's the same TIF, but essentially they would agree to participate in the TIF.
So it would just be one TIF.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's the state's role in it? What would they be? How are they financing it?
Well, there's property tax on, the state has a property tax, and that would be it. Now, there are some other types of TIF that we're looking at, and some of that would be not just property tax. It could be some sales tax. It could be some other type of things. But we don't know. We're still negotiating with the state on that. Eric, would you not agree that that's still up in the air and being talked about?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned when we set up our development area, our TIF council is aiming for the program that I think he believes if we qualify for is the most beneficial. But there are 2 or 3 different versions of programs which we may qualify for with varying levels of participation. So obviously, as we work with the state, we'll see where they believe we fit in best, obviously. And once again, that's kind of part of the next step of the process is figuring out what we can do and then working with them to complete our application and get it to them in a form that we think is going to be successful for one of those programs.
And Mary Lynn and library board members, the important thing that as we go through this process, as we try to bring the state in, they want to make sure that everybody else is investing in this property too. The state is not going to do it unless everybody else is going to be part of it. So city and county, we hope the library board, we hope the health department board will all be part of this process in whatever way suits you all financially. But the more that we have as part of this, the better it looks to the state that everybody's willing to put skin in the game, for lack of a better way to say it, in building this development.
What will the library be required to vote on? The like approval of the concept or will we actually be required to vote on the agreement after it's all been negotiated and all the I's have been dotted and T's have been crossed?
You will actually vote on a commitment of you want to give. Now, this, I just throw this out. Let's say you want to give 50% of the tax, the property tax that you would get off of this new development into the TIF for however many years, and it may be 10 years, it may be so. For let's just say, for the sake of it, 10 years, you get, and you're going to get 50% of it. So as it's being developed, the value of the property is going to go up. But there will be a bar and that is set, and you will get that amount of money, and you're not getting that now, but you will get that amount of money plus 50% of the new growth in tax revenue for 10 years. After that 10 years, then you will get 100% of it. So that's basically that's the cliff notes of how it works.
I think it's also important for you all to know as a taxing district that each taxing district can have their own independent pledge. So just because the city or county pledges such a percentage of their marginal tax revenue for such a period of time, that doesn't mean you're stuck to the same terms.
Right.
So each taxing district can choose how many years and what percentage and to what end, as well as what, if there's something about the project that is particularly valuable to that particular taxing entity and their mission, to potentially negotiate what they'd like to see happen as part of that. I don't know what that could be for the library, but
Well, here was the reason for my question. I thought I understood that the particulars are to be negotiated in individual agreements with the developers. And so what I'm asking is, are those going to be negotiated and decided upon by the time we vote on them, or are we just voting on the concept and then all the details are handled later? And where I'm going with that is I just have some questions about, I'm probably getting way down the weeds here when we're at 30,000 feet, but so what happens if it doesn't pan out? What happens if it does pan out initially, but then goes under? What happens if it changes owners? What happens if a lender forecloses on it? And I'm sorry, but I'm a lawyer and I have to think of worst case situations.
yeah.
That's what I'm looking.
As I told you, Bob, earlier, when we come back to you, and we will be coming back to you and to get into the weeds, there will be a lawyer with us, a tax incremental lawyer. That's his job. That's what we're paying him. The city and county are paying him, and he will explain, he'll answer all those questions and make sure that you all understand it. And then at that point in time, you all can say, you want to be in, and this is what we want to do, or we don't want to be in. And so that'll be the end of it. But he will be there to answer all of the questions when we get that far into the weeds, as you would say.
This is what occurs to me. When we get into the weeds, it sounds like we want to get in the weeds and understand it all before we take a vote. I mean, I don't see us talking to the bond lawyer and getting into the weeds and immediately voting. I mean, it's almost like we wouldn't quite understand until the moment you asked us to vote.
Well, and I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. So, and we can do that. We can set it up where we will come and we will present to you, and we will say this, and Bob being your lawyer, this is the procedure that you need to look at. And so then you all will ask all the questions that you want to know, and then we will leave, and then you all will say, okay. We might say though, Mary Lynn, and it may be time restricted. We may say, okay, we've given you all the information that we can give you. We need a decision and a document by 3 weeks after that meeting or 2 weeks after that meeting. Right. So I'm sure that it will be time restricted on a commitment. Because once all that's together, we got to go back to the developer and say,
yeah, I understand that. I just want us to totally understand this before we start making decisions.
And just to add what the judge was saying, and obviously, as he said, in terms of the particulars of the documentation, we can always put you guys in touch and deal with TIF counsel. But the way I imagine this in the next few months plays out, because obviously before we ask you all or any other taxing district to participate in what we would like to, hope that you would choose to participate with, we've got to figure out, us being the city or the county, what our role is going to be. So we need to lay out the framework of, here's the amount of money that we need to make this viable. Now let's start a framework, and this will, I'm assuming, be a little back and forth before we get to that day of asking you to sign off on something. Is, okay, we believe the city is willing to sign on for this percentage, for this many years, for this part of the project that will generate this amount of money. We think the county will do this, health will do this, library will do this, and then we can share that and say, guys, this is the framework we think we're comfortable with. Chew on it. What do you think? And I'm imagining that over the course of the next few months, we'll be doing that back and forth until people are willing potentially to sign on the dotted line. And then, we would do that, because at the end of the day, we need to know what the target is, and then who's willing to help out with what piece of the pie, essentially. So that's what we're trying to find out now.
Do you know if the city will be issuing bonds, or will it be the owner, developer will be financing it?
There's a couple of different ways this can work. And so back to the question of the risk of what if the marginal revenue doesn't come, or what if the development fails? The bond issuance is the biggest question that tells you what your risk level is. Many times TIFs will operate and it'll be more of a reimburse the developer for the investments he makes. And when you do that, typically in the arrangement, the development agreement, you may put in there protection for yourself. You may say, okay, the city, for example, maybe is going to put this percentage of revenue for this number of years up to this amount to pay for parking garage, for example. But you can write into the agreement, as I understand it, you can also protect yourself by saying this up to this amount for this parking garage, or whatever the TIF generates, whichever is less. So that even if that fails to come to fruition, or the revenue just doesn't quite get to where it's going, but the development's still happening, you can build in to that negotiation an ability to say, look, we're willing to give you this much money out of the marginal tax, but we're not going to dip into the general fund to pay you out if this doesn't work. The other extreme, and then there's everything in the middle. The other extreme would be if the city or county participates in constructing something or supplying money on the front end and issues debt. And then you would have to arrange how you're going to pay for that debt. And so in those cases, you would issue debt and then arrange in the development arrangement how you're going to use that marginal revenue to pay service on the debt. Obviously, I think it's clear to most of us that's going to be a more risky endeavor for a taxing district, because in the event that the marginal revenue doesn't come, you still have debt. And so you need to think really hard about how much debt, if you choose to do that, you're willing to go into versus how much marginal revenue you hope to get. And I would think a smart elected official like the judge would probably want to hedge his bets and make sure there's a margin in there, a margin of the margin, if you will, to make sure that you don't sign us on for something that we're hoping the TIF revenue might just barely, if everything works out perfectly, pay for, or something like that. And that gets to a strategic question for our elected officials to really start wrestling with in the next couple of months.
I have two questions. One, Judge, you talked about the school district being a big winner. They're a taxing district like we are. Why are they a big winner and not being asked to participate?
Because they're exempt from this process. The TIF agreements exempt school tax because schools need the revenue, or so they need the revenue more than other entities. Not that we all don't need it, but the schools are exempt. And so that's just part of what the state decided. I think all the schools were scared. Whoa, wait a minute, that could really hurt us. So the state allows them to be exempt. Okay.
And then, and this is assuming it all goes well on the front end, is how do those funds get distributed? How do TIF funds get distributed, and who decides? And
so ultimately, as part of all of our agreements and those things, at some point you have to name someone, as I understand it, someone or something, a TIF agency. That can be the city's finance department. That can be an entire different agency you create, or any number of things. And that agency is essentially, from what I understand it, who would control those dollars and then potentially allocate them at the appropriate time to the appropriate purpose. And so that'll be part of this whole thing, is who's going to be the agency? Is it the city? Is it the county? Is it a different group we create? And figuring that part out.
so in the case like with the Broadway improvements that you were talking about, in that span between big project and warehouse project, there's no private developer that would incur expenses on Broadway improvements, but I assume the city and or the state would. So could the city and the state be recipients of that TIF money to do those streetscape improvements like you were talking about, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all public improvements, which, you know, a lot of cities will use TIF, not necessarily just associated with a particular development. Sometimes they'll make very large areas to essentially earmark marginal funds that they think are going to be developed for just that, for specific public infrastructure projects, which may not necessarily directly benefit a particular development or not. It may just benefit the area or the neighborhood.
Okay.
Natalie, I have a question. Guys, Connie Crow here. Can you give us an example of a TIF project that we might be familiar with within the state that has been successful with this process?
There are, I don't know the specifics of it, but our TIF attorney says that several projects are done in Newport, and I believe the levee in Newport is part of it. And there's something in Covington too that has been done. Eric, in Center Point in Lexington,
I
being
believe
done.
so. I believe so.
Well,
Bill has done multiple TIF projects over the years, most of which have been successful. Several years ago, before we got directly into this, when we had a working group that kind of went in and looked at it, if you all recall, a joint city-county working group for economic development incentives, and we learned a lot about TIF and kind of the basics anyways of the process. I spoke to the folks in Hopkinsville at that time because we found out they had been involved in some, and so we got some useful information from them. But they, at that time, I think had 3 either active or already successful TIF type programs.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, this is Bernie Mazahiri. I have a question for you all. I must have missed the part that I don't understand. Why would the library want to participate in this?
well, the more we grow, the more the increased value of property, which means more money to the library. That's the way personal property works. That if we grow and the values of property increase, and the values of property definitely will increase in the downtown area with this type of project, then the more money the library will receive.
I see. How about for private businesses? I mean, which private businesses have offered to give money?
Eric, you want to answer that? We haven't gotten to that point of private businesses to, other than developer working on monies.
Right. We wouldn't ask other private businesses in the development area to pledge their finances to this project. It's TIF is primarily about pledging future revenues of the public entities towards a private project that otherwise would not occur. And back to your point, and to the judge answering, the reason that a taxing district of any kind would choose to participate in a TIF is because they believe that this is future revenue that they would not have if they did not participate to make a project go to generate higher property taxes and occupational tax revenue otherwise. So it's a partial investment for a return on more tax revenue in the future, essentially.
Well, the last governor took a lot of money away from libraries. I mean, it's not like we're flush with cash. I mean, businesses would benefit from the same way as the first speaker mentioned, that the library will one day benefit as well, too.
Yeah. And so let me say this, and I didn't say it earlier, but I was thinking as Natalie was talking that I need to say this. You all were talking about in December, you're going to get your tax revenue, your check from your property tax from the sheriff's office. Well, whatever you get, whatever you're getting right now, you're going to at least get that and not more. This is not going to take anything away from what you're already getting. what you're already getting, and anything on top of that, you will continue to get. This is only for this small area that we're talking about, that you would give up some of it, but you're not getting anything on it right now anyway. So you're going to get more than you've ever gotten from it, but you're going to give up some of what you could get, so you can get a lot more in the long run, so the project can be built. And that's kind of the easy way of saying it, the simplest way to say it anyway.
And how many years would this be a promise for?
Well, now that depends on the taxing districts. As I said earlier, it could go 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. And it's just going to depend on the revenue that we can produce to help the developer when it comes to the infrastructure that they're going to need revenue for in building the projects. It's an investment that we will put in there, saying that we are saying that if we give you 30% of this new revenue that you're going to develop to build it, then we expect at some point in time to get 100% of that $85 million that you're putting into it. So we're gonna help you do it, but we're gonna get rewards in the end once it's done. So it's an interesting way to go about getting something done. But whoever came up with it was pretty smart, to be honest with you. But you're betting, basically, and I hate to use the word betting, but you're saying that if you go with it, yeah, we like and we believe that this is going to be great for our community. And we know that right now, as you build it, we see your vision, and if you build what you're saying you're going to do, which will be part of the TIF, you got to do it, then we expect to get a lot more money.
And Judge, just to clarify what I think you said earlier to Bernie's question, is that the library, as assuming potential fourth participant in this TIF, would be able to set the terms by which we participate, meaning the amount of tax revenue we give up and the time in which we agree to give up that revenue.
That's right. And to be honest with you, the 4 entities that will be asked to do this: the city, the county, excluding the state, the city, the county, the health department, and the library board. There can be 4 different ways they want to do it. The city may do it one way, the county may do it another way, the library may do it another percentage, a different percentage than the health department. So all 4 are independent in how they approach it.
That's helpful.
I still want to understand the risk, because I know there's risk, and I'm trying to figure out who is at risk. But if the library agrees to dedicate some incremental revenue that we would be getting, can we write that up in such a way that we would not be taking any risks, that you wouldn't come back to us if the projections are wrong and somebody needs more money in order to pay the developer or to pay debt service?
Yeah.
Can you assume, I mean, what risk would the library be taking?
I think that's all when you go to the details of the agreement, as I mentioned before, and the idea is that you have an agreement written in a way that those revenues are not handed out until the developer lives up to their end of the bargain, and so you really got to look through how you do that. It's not a simple answer beyond, as we talked about, working through the development agreement, and then you all with your counsel doing your part to protect yourselves based on what you're willing to do and when you're willing to do it.
So Mary Lynn, it's basically this: you're not going to lose anything or gain anything unless they do it. So if they don't do let's say that they build 2 structures and that's it. Well, you're giving up only the value of those 2 structures. So you're not, if you commit to 10 years of 50% of the revenue, well, of the property tax, then if it only goes up 30,000, then you're only going to give up 50% of what you were going to get from that $30,000.
In other words, we would only commit what is realized as incremental.
That is exactly right. That's
Okay.
exactly right. So you're not losing, you're just not getting what we anticipated. So that's why it's kind of it all falls in place and trying to push. Let's make sure that we get this $85 million development out here.
That's why I like the idea of each taxing district having an individual agreement. So I like to mention that because, and that gets back to what I was concerned about a while ago about, if the project isn't viable or goes under or whatever. So anyway, that's just a comment. Someone asked a while ago about other projects, so I have been Googling while people have been talking. And the Economic Development Cabinet is a good site on this if you want to take a look at it, just for educational purposes. And the Kentucky League of Cities, too, has something about TIF projects. But to answer the question, I think it was Connie, other projects, Paducah Downtown Riverfront Development Project, Lexington Center Project, City Center in Lexington, which I think is Center Point, what they used to call that. Northern Kentucky University Campus Gateway, downtown Owensboro. The U of L Shelby campus is, they're trying to turn that into, I think, a technology center. And here's one I did not know at all. And it's kind of surprising me, the Summit at Fritz Farm, the big shopping center out of Manor, Nicholson. So just, that's what this is. Anyway, that was a Lane Report article.
Thank you. Well, if there are not any other questions, thank you for this opportunity. When we do come back, we will have, his name is Jim Parsons with us, and Jim we have hired him, the city and county have jointly hired him to be our tax attorney to help us. We have those, whatever you've asked tonight, we've asked, and you've asked some questions that we haven't asked, so we will continue to ask those questions. That's why we need legal counsel as we move forward through this process. But we will come back with him to help you clear the weeds, get out of the weeds and understand it to the best that we can. And then you all will work your document up, whatever you all decide to do. Is that fair enough?
It is. Thank you.
We appreciate it, and what I'd kind of like to tell all the groups that we've been meeting with, obviously you can always get a hold of the judge, myself, Chuck Knowles, Tommy. If any questions come up, shoot me an email, and if I don't know the answer, we'll try to get one for you. Also, if you all find at home, at work, in your social circles that you keep hearing the same question repeated a lot, feel free to let us know too, because if we need to target outreach with particular pieces of information that people are particularly either misinformed or just don't know and want to know, we're more than happy to take those leads and then target some information to get out to the public as we work through this, because we want to continue trying to educate everybody else as we educate ourselves. So, we're always available, and we appreciate the time.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Judge Wells, for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, board members. So I would suggest that as, that we sort of create our own list of questions that we have about these. And Jean, you wouldn't mind just being the funnel through, if we could send you questions that we have along the way, and you could just start our list,
Yes.
that might be helpful before they come back again.
Could I make a comment?
Who's that? Wait, hang on.
Gary?
Yes, yeah, please do. Yeah, I was going to ask for your all's input.
The library district actually is in a kind of a good position when it comes to a TIF district, because the ad valorem property tax is usually considered the safest and the most easily demonstrable benefit from a TIF is the increase in local tax. And you are pledging a portion of your future revenue. So the risk in a well-executed agreement is pretty small. The other thing I want to mention is that we have several libraries in Kentucky who are already taking part in TIF districts. One of which might be a good one for you to contact is the Campbell County Public Library, because they're taking part in 2 TIF districts, and he's very positive about the experience. He was initially pretty reluctant, and it is a complicated experience. He does have very good legal representation, and so he could probably give you some good advice and some caveats that you might want to look at about what when you're considering this. But J.C. Morgan is the librarian there, and that's probably who you should contact. And he'll probably have you talk to his attorney. I'm not sure what the risk is, but there's risk to everything. But it can be a good thing, especially when you start getting into the other kinds of TIFs, when you start getting the ones based on sales tax and things like that. It gets a lot more complicated. Property tax is much simpler.
What about the rate compensation if we are a participant in a TIF district? Does that change at all? The compensating rate, how that gets calculated?
Makes no difference at all.
Okay.
So when you touch the compensating rate, you develop that amount that's dedicated to the TIF isn't even in there. It's already taken out? Or?
No, it's left. It's still in there. If it was out, it would change the rate. It's still in there just as if you were not giving it to the TIF at all.
But that seems like that would not benefit us.
I'm sorry, that increases your assessments though, so that would have an effect on the compensating rate.
So when do we, like if we do participate, do we hand money over to somebody or do they take it out before we ever get it? Does the library make a payment like Campbell County? Do they make a payment into a fund or?
I don't know. That's the best way I can answer that.
Yeah.
I can tell you that when the property valuations start going up because of the TIF, then your rate will probably drop because you'll be receiving additional revenue. But you'll be receiving new property, you will be receiving tax on that anyway. So you'll be losing a portion of the new property tax that you would have been receiving. Like, so let's say you were supposed to, if you weren't doing the TIF, you got $100, but you gave them 30%, so you'll get 70. So then it's figured in, but it's not taken out before we figure your tax rates or anything. It's figured as property.
How is this not using the library's taxing authority for library service to pay for some other thing?
That's a good question. And that's one that we long had, because we used to think, it used to be common opinion that library taxes could only be used for library purposes. But again, talking to Campbell County, their attorney up there and several attorneys, because I think there's some other libraries that have done this, general economic development can be a purpose of the library. Using the theory, a rising sea raises all ships or whatever. So, but it has been done and it's been given the green light everywhere I know it's been checked. But I do encourage you to talk to an attorney, a knowledgeable attorney, and say.
Okay, thank you.
I assume that the statutes that created a TIF specifically talked about independent taxing districts. That authorizing
They're
statute.
kind of vague, like a lot of statutes.
Maybe we need to go back and look at that, yeah.
Well, isn't the using the money for this intended purpose, isn't that in the Constitution?
That's in the Constitution, yes.
Right, right.
But I mean, I see the benefits of doing it, so I'm not wanting to be, a pure skeptic, but I was just wanting to understand kind of the paper trail, or how you make sure that it's not going to be challenged later or something. So that all sounds good.
And there's been at least one TIF that was not successful in Kentucky, and it was the Yum Center. Those projections, what was projected didn't come in, so they had to dig deeper. I guess the city of Louisville, whoever issued the bonds. And so I still have that question. Can we write up an agreement if we decide to participate? Can we write up an agreement that says, this is it, you can't come back for more?
I think that may be one of the largest dangers, just to throw this out, is that if you not to the library specifically, but to any entity involved, but once you get into it, if it appears the revenues aren't going to come in, that you may feel obligated to try to save your project. And so I'm not sure, assuming you have a well-written, wouldn't necessarily be obligated to do so. But if you've got this new development, there may be a lot of pressure on the city, the county, you, whoever, to see that it doesn't go under.
Well, the risk is a little scary in that case.
Right. Speaking in naval references, there's the tide that lifts all ship. There's also the sinking ship that you don't want to be attached to. Board members, do you all have other questions right now? Any other thoughts? Anything you're still confused on?
Basically, if the project failed and if there was not additional income, we wouldn't be obligated to pay for something that wasn't there. I would say a percentage of something that wasn't there. Is that not correct?
But somebody is going to be obligated. That's my question. Somebody's at risk on this. Who's taking the risk?
And also, how does the district get dissolved in that case? Does everything go away, or all obligations go away, or?
The way I understood it, that would be part of individual agreements. That's
okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
At least it implied. And but yeah, I mean, you're right. That's got to be addressed. But I think in the end, it's not like we'd be required to pay money. That's not it. We're just giving up a certain amount of revenue.
So if they build half a building, the contractor goes bankrupt, the library wouldn't be obligated to help pay for the building or something like that. The risk to the district would be that instead of having an open lot that might have otherwise turned into a successful project, you've got kind of half of a building there and they're not paying taxes at all because they're bankrupt. Is that the risk, is that there might theoretically have been a higher taxable value and now you're stuck for a while, possibly for a long while, with a lower taxable value?
I think that's right. And that's why I would want something in there, would hope that there would be something in there that if it, if it goes belly up, if it gets foreclosed on or something like that happens, that, there's an out that we can begin taxing it.
Well, and again, I'm just thinking if the project goes south, there's still debt service that's going to be required to be paid. Who's paying it? What happens? I guess that's the question when we get down to the weeds, is what happens? Like you asked it, Bob. We still don't know what happens.
Well,
if it goes south.
Lenders would be involved. So, you'd have lenders and whatever financing structure they put together, and, you know, potentially, I guess, the bondholders, like that was mentioned too, but that's the risk of investing, but I don't think it would be us.
And
Well, who would it be though? Then who would it be? That's what I'm asking.
Well, that's what I'm saying, the bondholders or their lenders. Yeah. And obviously the investors in the project, the private investors in the project. So,
and if this TIF money is supposed to be, it is supposed to be utilized for public infrastructure improvements, certainly it wouldn't go to debt service, I mean, maybe we would need to write that into our agreement, but I agree with Mary Lynn, that's not what we want. We don't want to give up tax revenue, pay off a defunct development.
Let me ask you all this question. Did anybody say how much revenue that they were anticipating that this property would bring to the library on an annual basis 10 years from now?
We would have to, I think we'll have, no, the answer is no. He did say that it was an $85 million investment. And so I assumed that would be also be the assessed value of the project when completed. Now, I don't know what kind of timeline they're looking at for completion of the project.
well, maybe or maybe not, but that's at least a number to work with.
When are they going to come back and talk to us again, Natalie, next month or December?
It didn't sound like next month to me. They did not say, but it didn't sound like it was moving as fast as next month. Did you all get that impression?
I think it sounds like they want to have everything in place by the end of the year. So that's only
That's
2
true.
meetings
2
away
months.
for us. I mean, unless we had special meetings, so.
I'm thinking they might come back to us in that time frame.
Well,
Natalie.
we have, like where Campbell County's done this.
I have the agreement, one of the TIF agreements,
Well,
Campbell County.
since Campbell County's done this, would it benefit us to talk to them? Find out what they know of.
I have talked to JC Morgan, and I have a copy of and I think I have the number of their TIF attorney, the person that they use. So I can reach out to both JC and their attorney if you'd like me to see if we can get some more information from him.
Most definitely. And when they do come back, they're going to bring their attorney. I would love to have, if Bob or Bernie feels comfortable being our attorney, you know, during that meeting, or if we need to go to another outside attorney. But I think we should have our own.
I think ultimately.
They've completed either. You know, it sounds like they're still in the process too of working everything out for what the city and county are going to do as well.
I think so.
Doesn't sound like they're going to be doing more guidelines going to this. They haven't. Yeah.
Ultimately, I think we would need to get council involved for sure. But I think at this point, we're just kind of figuring out what the questions are and trying to get some general answers that we can so that it goes further. You know, we'll ask more educated questions, more informed questions, and then give whatever counsel that we end up engaging something to work with. So that's how I see it going forward. Somebody
you might consider contacting the Cabinet for Economic Development also. You know, they're the ones that administer the state TIF program, and they might be able to provide you some information.
So why don't we all just kind of take notes and formulate questions, and we can try to corral all that and get some direction and go from there.
Yeah, and as early as we can get from the city, the development agreement and I guess development agreement is what they will provide us, which will outline what the developer is going to do. And the participation agreement is what they're looking for us to provide.
Yes, I think so.
I
Okay.
wonder if they have a template that they could share with us. Obviously, we would decide, we would refine it, but would they be bringing us some language? I mean, we would decide what percentage, if we were going to participate, what percentage and for how many years, but I would think they would have some language already written out that we would start with.
Well, we maybe could start with the Campbell County language, which I assume would be more tailored to a library role. Jean, did you say you had a copy of their participation agreement? Okay, great.
I have one of their 2 TIFs. I have one. Yes,
Jean, you shared that with us, didn't you?
I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of, maybe back even in the summer.
Yeah.
I think
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember you sending it.
I'd be happy to share it again.
They're typically pretty thorough on things like that. So it would be a good starting point, as Mary Lynn's suggesting, that you would, and Natalie, that you'd have a good library referenced and thoroughly thought through document to start from.
Could we perhaps ask them if they want to speak to us in our next meeting, or is that not something we want to pursue? The Campbell County director.
That's up to you all. I can ask him. I mean, it makes it easier since we're Zooming, so there's no travel involved. So if you'd like, I can ask JC if he'd participate.
Yeah.
Hey, I have another question. The property, are they talking about just purely the empty lot that's green there, or are they talking about some other properties too?
Oh, yeah, more. They're talking about
So
possibly the YMCA building.
YMCA is.
And then there is a warehouse. As you go up, you know how Broadway goes straight up, there's an old warehouse there that is part of the project too. They added that later. The owner wants to do a boutique hotel there, something, is that right, Natalie? Is it boutique hotel? And they were needing help on infrastructure. I'm thinking parking, but I might be wrong on that. So it is a huge project, and there are a lot of moving parts here. And
are we getting any money right now from the YMCA? And if so, how much are we getting off of that property?
No, it's zoned special government right now, so it's not a taxable property for us.
the only taxable property is probably that warehouse, and there's an empty lot next to the warehouse.
Which the city owns, so.
Oh,
yeah.
so it's just the warehouse right now, whatever we're getting from the warehouse.
Can't be much. I don't know what the assessment is, but I mean, it's not been used in forever. So.
Yeah.
What other TIF-related questions do you all have for now, or are we at a point where we can sleep on things and start getting questions to Jean for compile? Okay, we're ready for the last.
I think a lot of our questions will come after they come back to us.
That's what I think too. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Okay, so Jean, will you send us Campbell County's participation agreement one more time? And then board members, if you think of other questions that, of course, you can send them to Jean, but feel free on your own if you want to send questions to Eric Cockley. He seemed to be the point man for this.
I am going to leave. If I can be of any further assistance, please let me know.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you for coming.
In here,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
I'm gonna need
participating.
to sign off too, but I'd like to, Gene, could you copy me on the Campbell agreement? I'd be interested in seeing that.
Mhm.
May I email a link to everybody from the, it's called the lincolnstudy.edu. One thing that it came across as the lawmakers, and I'm just going to read this one sentence to everybody. Lawmakers in Kentucky responded to one troubled TIF district by authorizing the extension of its duration from 23 to 45 years. You know, I wonder if this TIF for the library is more like giving up our first child, like in the story of Rumpelstiltskin.
Bernie, definitely email that to us. Yes, that'd be great. Okay, on that note, let me pull my agenda back up. I'm not used to sitting down for long meetings anymore, you guys. But Jean did attach she attached her director's report. But Jean, I'd love to hear, you don't have to read it verbatim, but we would love to hear highlights straight from you if you, for your
You'll see that our participation, our programs and things really are doing very well considering our constrained timing and resources. So really pleased with that. We've discovered a new hybrid way to do adult programmings. We may try to do this with the youth too, but doing a Zoom presentation and then streaming it live to Facebook so that people who didn't sign up necessarily for the program can still participate. And then they can still view that after the program is ended. And we've had really great engagement with that. We're going to be using that model a little bit more. So, you know, that was something that the staff decided to try, and it's worked out well. So we'll be continuing that. The maintenance issues, it seems like they're never ending. The process for replacing the chiller is underway. They have to complete hooking that up, and it's taking a little bit longer than I thought it would. They came back today to do that. They'll be here tomorrow to do it as well. Last Thursday, the first compressor stopped working, and we had a technician come, got it working, but believes that there is a sensor that it might be bad with that. So they're going to investigate that once the new chiller is up and running. We may be able to harvest parts or something from the old chiller to the new chiller, to the old condenser to the new one, but they won't know that until we can actually, we don't want to be without one completely. So they're waiting to dig into that until we get the new compressor up and running, which I hope will be tomorrow. So it seems like every time I think we're going to be at a place where we can say this is done, then it's not really. So, and we had an unanticipated repair on the boiler that was supposed to be repaired and some preventive maintenance done. When they got that back up and going, it didn't go. And when they took it apart to see what was wrong, the ceramic heat burner was broken. There was an air filter missing. They think that something came in from outside, got into the burner and got too hot and caused it to crack. So that was an additional $8,000 repair that after talking with Natalie and Bob and the building committee, we decided to go ahead and have Ware continue to make that, since they're the ones who did that and discovered the problem. So they'll be doing that. We haven't scheduled that repair yet. But the good thing is that even with all of these things, even with that additional repair, we should still be able to fund everything with the money that's been allotted for what has been budgeted. So if we have anything else happen, knock wood, please don't let that happen. we may have to allot or change funding, but otherwise, Jim has really been on top of things. He's keeping an eye on things on a daily basis, monitoring things that, and he's doing a good job of keeping things going. So I value him greatly, that I'm not having to be the one who's doing that monitoring. So I believe that we're coming to an end of the bigger issues. So it's a good timing because it's getting cold and we need all of our parts working properly. So.
Do you all have questions for Jean? Just note at the end of your report, you do talk about the strategic plan and marketing for next year. Not knowing what the quarantine protocols hold for us, are you anticipating a January kind of marketing campaign or more like March and April?
We'll probably start the marketing campaign. We can market our virtual services. We can market what we do have and what people can participate in. I don't see that we're going to let that go for a long time. I mean, people still can come in and use the library to check out books and movies. So I think that we'll be doing more of a general awareness so that people don't forget they can use what we have, even if we can't have in-person meetings for the next few months or in-person programs, and that we'll be trying to reach out to people virtually. So I see us starting that certainly, if not in December, then certainly by January. Yeah.
And not knowing how long the COVID will be here, it makes sense to be marketing heavily what we are doing.
Yeah.
And I can see in the winter months too, doing things virtually, we may have more participation virtually than we would in person, just because like my mom's participated in things and she would never come out. She wouldn't be able to come out as much to library activities. And now she's more involved with things like that just because they're online. So there may be a group of the population that may increase the participation.
I see the virtual aspect of programming continuing even once we're back to so-called normal. I think that people have appreciated the convenience of it and will want that to continue. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think it's here to stay in some form.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Let's move on to committee reports. I'm not aware that any committee met efficiently. Jean already covered what we talked about or what the building committee has talked about. Anything I'm missing as far as committee reports? Okay. Our new business was kind of that TIP presentation. We already took care of that. Old business, the travel restrictions or advisory policy that we started to discuss last week. We've consulted with our insurance carrier to further massage the language to make sure that we have as much assurance in this as we can, and Jean has attached that to our in our email. I'm pulling it up as I talk. Do you all have any further questions or concerns about the policy?
I just want to say we didn't meet as a committee. I did share this language. Jean shared it with me, and I shared it with the Policy and Personnel Committee. And I think most of us are comfortable with it. Bernie, I don't want to put you on the spot, and you don't have to comment on this. Bernie is still a little concerned about some possibility of future litigation, that this could open us up to litigation. But personally, I think we should have something in place. I don't know what it is, but I mean, that's just my personal opinion. And I think that because we have contacted our insurance company and had them look at the language and modify it, or had talked to Jean about how to modify it, I think that we've covered all of our bases and we've done as much due diligence as a board that we can if we're going to put a policy in place.
Well, Cheryl and I did speak, and I did relay to Cheryl that I objected to the policy. I believe that the potential risks are outweighed by any possible benefit that it could produce. And some of the risks that I see happening is in the implementation of the policy. An employee can argue that there was discriminatory intent on how it was implemented to certain individuals versus other individuals. I also see concerns about wage and hour, and if it's something that is commonly done at several of the libraries, it was mentioned before that this was, essentially an idea from other libraries in Kentucky. If for whatever reason another library gets sued and there is a class claim, we could easily be part of that. And as someone who does employment law, other than just the risks involved with it, I don't think it's very good for morale of employees if their boss knows and asks questions about where they've been. So those are my objections, but I mentioned them last time, so I didn't really want to bring them up again.
And I appreciate that, Barney. I just want to make sure everybody is fully informed before we make a vote.
Well, before we vote, we would need a motion to approve the proposed policy as drafted. Is there a motion to do that?
I will make the motion. And I like to add, I appreciate Bertie's observations, and I think they caused us to look at it a little harder, and I believe prompted us to ask for the insurer's input, which I think was valuable. So
I
the motion, I'm
completely agree too.
Yeah, I'm making the motion. I'm not discounting Bernie's concerns or contributions.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion or thoughts on this?
Just sort of nitpicky, but it says travel to one of the states, and it could be, I mean, would that be better to say area, because it could be that it's not a state somebody's going to, or it could be a city, or a, whatever.
Could be a country.
Could be. If Americans are allowed to go anyplace.
Does that leave too much ambiguity though? Because typically the easiest thing to track is the I think, though I haven't been tracking nationwide. States tend to report their numbers. I'm looking to see where we say states. Travel to
It's in the very first row.
Wait, in the very first sentence?
Yeah.
Right there.
Sorry. Fine.
And what about DC?
Well, there's just so many that are identified though, right? It's high risk. On the COVID-19 page, there's only certain states identified as high states. So, and there's only like 5. And there's only certain states where they recommend you quarantine 2 weeks after visiting that state.
So
I
it's
have the
bad to reference that.
very. It's the same page that's supposed to color up your county and how many cases you've had to determine if we have school. There's only certain states that are quarantine states. And that changes actually, it changes depending on the number of positive cases they've had versus, the population. So that continually changes. It's like the CDC website.
Why don't we reference that in the policy, since it's a definitive source, 15% according to.
It says as recommended by the Kentucky Department of Health, which is the page that Caroline was speaking of.
Right.
If you say states or other jurisdictions, does that cover it?
Like Kentucky's not.
Hear you.
People could travel to our state without quarantine. But Florida is one of the states that you wouldn't want. But there's several. There's like 5. There's only like 5 though. There's not that many. Arthur, Cheryl, I can't pull it up.
It's usually,
it'll crash my computer, but I think
I've never seen more than 5.
There are 8 right now.
Oh, well, there you go.
But that's just happened between yesterday and today. Yesterday there were 7, today there are 8.
see, it changes.
It changes daily. Mm-hmm.
It does.
Well, let's put a reference in the policy to the, 15% according to, so that we know the source for that number, so that somebody couldn't come in and argue, oh, well, yeah, but locally it said that it was only 12% or something like that. Am I making sense?
Do you want more? The policy does refer to the Kentucky Department of Health, and that's directly from the governor, the Team Kentucky, the KY COVID-19 page.
Is that okay? Is that what we're talking about the same thing?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Jean, you're making it look like I haven't read the policy.
I'm sorry. You probably read it too many times.
I think I read it, an hour and 45 minutes ago.
Brains are full of tips.
Okay. So forget everything that I said. Bob did say states or other jurisdictions, which I think might be suitable as an edit.
Yep.
You guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll be glad to amend the motion.
Good, let's do it.
So it would now read following travel to one of the states or other jurisdictions, reporting, et cetera, et cetera.
That sounds great. Who seconded it the first time?
I seconded it the first time. I'll second it the second time.
Okay, great. Are we ready to take a vote? Okay, all in favor of approving the new travel related to coronavirus policy with the edit as stated by Bob in his motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Do we need to? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Whew. Okay, let me get us back, get my screen back to the agenda, because I think that's all for now. Next board meeting, November 10th. We will wait, if we hear back from the city or county on the TIF information, anything as much as a development agreement or anything else in between, I'm sure it'll come through Jean and she'll let us know.
Yes.
Okay. In the meantime, you all have a good night. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thanks, Bob. Second.
I'll second.
Yay. Okay, thanks, everybody. All in favor?
Aye.